Welcome back, everyone. This is Daring Discussions, the podcast where we keep it real, raw, and righteous. As always, it's me, your girl, Brittany Broaddus-Smith, the number one Christian sexologist and your favorite girlfriend. I missed y'all. This is season 3. As you already know, we are a testimony service, and today's testimony, I'm just going to say the Lord is good and he is able. Okay, today's topic, and we're going to be talking about declaring victory over vices. And some of the vices that we're going to be talking about today are ones that are common in our community. And how do I know? Because y'all be in my DMs all the time asking about this particular conversation. And we've had one of these conversations before in a prior episode, but having someone really talk about what they go through, how they overcome as a couple, and what the Lord done in their life is just going to add so much richness to the discussion. But y'all don't need to hear that from me. I'm going to let you hear that from them. So let me bring my guest on today. Hello.
Hi. Hey. So excited to be here.
Mr. and Mrs. Joanna and Matthew Raabsmith. Thank you, of the founders of the Raabsmith team, power couple, counselors, lovers of Jesus, and two people who have a very, very, very powerful testimony. So why don't you, in Daring Discussions fashion, tell us who you are, why you're so dope, and why you are uniquely qualified to have this conversation of claiming victory over vices.
I'll take the easy question. Who we are. We're Matthew and Joanna Raabsmith. We've been married for 16 years now. We have 3 amazing kids. And we have the incredible opportunity and gift, the blessing, to have a ministry that's really about helping couples overcome the incredibly devastating effects of sexual addiction and betrayal and infidelity. And we get to do that because of really what God did in our life and what God challenged us to do kind of as we work through that process.
Yeah. And so we are trained. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. My husband and I are also both professional coaches. And so we work with couples, people all over the country who have experienced infidelity, betrayal, sexual addiction. And we're both trained by different organizations in betrayal trauma and helping people through repairing the wreckage. And in our work, both our personal journey and our professional work, we had the opportunity to really create a framework for couples healing from this called the Intimacy Pyramid. And we co-authored a book called Building True Intimacy with our good friend and colleague, Dan Drake, helping couples understand what that process really looks like.
Awesome. So you are that's a lot. Do y'all sleep?
Not much.
I mean, we stopped at 3 kids, but they y'all just kept going. It's like, when do y'all sleep? That is amazing. And I always appreciate, particularly in Christian spaces where people have the ability to take what the Lord has endowed them with, gifted them with, how, Holy Spirit has moved through their life in like in supernatural ways that can't necessarily be quantified, but also we have some credentials. So we're not just out here just, saying things. In addition to, we have some real life experiences. So This is my personal, professional, and God-led experience. So that trifecta is always wonderful to me. And so I want to start here and go take it in whatever direction you would like. As a sexologist, myself, licensed social worker, when we have the concept of sexuality as it relates to addiction and sexual addiction, there is a lot of debate in the field whether sex can actually be qualified as an addiction. And in the field of sexuality is leaning more towards more obsession, compulsion than actual addiction because of, how addiction rewires the brain and, those type of things, right? So in your field, from your vantage point and the work that you do with couples, how do you reconcile the addiction language with the support that you actually provide?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. We have really found it helpful to really let the client or the person who's going through the problematic issues to kind of self-define. I think when you start to kind of diagnose and you kind of label, that tends to not really go well. I found it really helpful in my own personal journey to kind of identify as an addict, mainly because I recognized that for years, even though this was doing irreparable damage to so many parts of my life, my ministry, my marriage, my friendships, my emotional well-being, I continued to do it. And that really kind of, for me, helped me understand, like, this isn't just something that, like, oh, it's a sin and I wish I kind of didn't do it. I wish I was better. Like, it had complete control of my life. It dictated so much of who I was. And so it was helpful to name how big it was. I think for so long in my journey, I wanted to minimize it and say, well, it's a little bit off to the side. It's not a big deal, right? But what I really recognized was that, no, it was big, and naming it as big was really helpful. So we really let our clients do that. We have some clients who say, like, I have a problem, right? We have some clients who identify as addicts, and we're really about, are you willing to name the issue? Are you to be real about what's happening in your life, or do you want to continue to pretend like it's nothing?
It's even interesting to look at the dynamic between the couple and how they want to see it, right? So sometimes partners, they feel really strongly that their spouse identify as an addict, but usually it's because they're kind of minimizing or downplaying what has happened, the impact, and what they really need to do to get free of this behavior. And so again, it's less about the label and more about what they're experiencing relationally.
That's really, really good, especially that last piece. As you were talking, I was thinking sometimes for either the person experiencing it or the partner, addict could be in, a term that's used to kind of maybe sidestep accountability, or to, as you said, kind of diminish the weight of what's going on. And so, Matt, can I call you Matt? I done got personal and shortened your name. Are you all right with that? We friends now.
I go by Matthew, but I'm pretty good.
Oh, I'll go Matthew.
I was close. I'm good.
Matthew's fine. I'll say Matthew. I was like, not a mate. We friends now at this point. I done gave him a nickname, didn't even ask. I apologize. So Matthew, you spoke about as you were talking about the addiction piece, and you talked about the damage that it was doing in so many parts of your own life. And what I understand is the foundation of the work that you do is your own testimony. And because this is testimony service, go ahead, Matthew, and testify. Like, what are we actually talking about, and how did we get here?
Yeah, it started really early for me, and it was interesting because addiction doesn't start as addiction.
Yes.
Problematic sexuality doesn't start that way. It was really about exposure to things that I didn't necessarily know were affecting me the way they were affecting me. This will age me a little bit, but I grew up in the 80s. We didn't have cable, and I remember when we got cable and you had to call your cable company to ask to get MTV. And I remember like my sister, I had an older sister, and she's like, we got to get MTV. I can remember watching MTV, and I remember watching Madonna, and I remember those were the kind of first sexualized images that I was exposed to. And I was really just kind of like living in this world where sex was kind of happening around me, but nobody was talking about it. Nobody was explaining it. Nobody was talking about what healthy versus unhealthy is. And so I was kind of having to figure it out on my own, but I knew it was this kind of alluring thing, and that's really what it stood for me. And as I started to grow, as I started to develop, some of the things that happen for all of us is we start to have insecurities. We start to have senses of ourselves that are kind of, am I enough? Is there something wrong with me? And I started to recognize that being sexual made me feel better about myself. If that meant like pursuing a relationship with a girl or seeing something sexual, I had a sense of kind of a soothing technique to it. It felt better. And so this pattern in my life developed that whenever I would start to feel bad about myself, I would pursue relationships and or sex. And I would do that over and over. I thought of it as just kind of normal living. It was like, you got a girlfriend, you had, you did these things. I never really saw it as this kind of snowball until really about the time in my young adult ages that I finally was exposed to kind of pornography. I grew up before high-speed internet. And so when high-speed internet came, pornography became something that was way more accessible, way more easy to kind of grasp. It was also something that was way more easy to engage without any kind of senses of loss or embarrassment. To start a conversation With a female, that took courage. To go online didn't take any courage. It didn't cost me anything. And so I started to quickly realize that I could engage in this soothing technique without any cost, without any risk to myself. So I thought, and that's where really everything started to kind of fall apart. It really became this kind of daily habit and practice. And as it became daily and habitual, I became more and more convicted about not making sure no one knew about it, keeping it very hidden, really leading a double life. I was a pastor for a number of years, and I would get up on stage and talk about healthy sexuality and then be using pornography, engaging in unhealthy sexual practices on the other half. And that's really what led me right into our relationship. And I had the dream that most addicts have, that if I find a happy relationship, a happy marriage, then everything will go away. It'll kind of take care of itself. And for the first parts of our relationship, it did. It kind of went away. I didn't think about it. I didn't need it. But as life moved on, right, as we kind of developed as a relationship, as I started taking on some of those anxieties and fears again, right, it was right there again, and it came back with a vengeance. And
we had really had a whirlwind early relationship. We dated for about 2 months before we got engaged, and then we were engaged for about 2 months before we got married. And so there's a lot of conversations we probably should have had that we didn't have. And so when we kind of got into marriage, everything was great in the beginning, but then we started hitting some bumps. That question came up in my mind, like, I wonder if this is a thing he struggles with. I wonder if this is something that's part of the reason we're having these struggles. And so I asked him about it. And when he answered, it was always like, in the past. This is something far back in my past that I struggle with, not present today.
Yeah. And I would maintain that lie. I would go live this double life. And Joanna would try to engage, sometimes sexually, with me, right? She would want to create intimacy. And the shame of acting out and what I was doing, I would actually pull away from her. I would be like, no, I don't feel good, or it's been a really hard day, right? And she would be really confused. And then I would get angry. I would be like, why are you being mad at me? Why are you taking this so bad? And this became this kind of pattern where we would have a really, really great connection and relationship, but this hidden part was really eating that alive. And year after year in our relationship, we were seeing kind of really no gains. We weren't getting any better. We really felt like there was this kind of glass ceiling that was keeping us from what we wanted in our marriage. And God works in mysterious ways. Joanna decided to get her master's in marriage and family therapy. And the first class she took was Shame and Guilt. What a great name for a class, right?
Yeah.
2-week intensive. And as a part of that class, there was an anonymous pastor who actually came and gave his testimony of healing, of overcoming sexual addiction in his own life, but also restoration in his marriage. And as he was talking, it just felt like my gut was telling me, this is it. This is the thing. And I started writing down every single resource he was talking about on my sheet of paper. And I went home that day and shared with Matthew what the pastor had said, what we had talked about, thinking I was cracking open a door that he was going to like walk through and finally be honest with me. He did not. And so I finally flat out asked him, is this the thing? Are you struggling with this? And is this what is keeping us stuck in our marriage?
And what Joanna didn't know is about a couple months before that, I had finally hit the wall. I realized like, this is killing me and it's killing us. I remember praying one night and going, okay, God, if you will just give me a path, like if you'll just show me what the way forward looks like, I'll take it, because I'm desperate. I can't have this anymore. But in many ways, I felt like the prayer went unanswered. I woke up the next day, there was no path in front of me. And so I remember kind of being disappointed. And Joanna comes home a couple months later, she starts telling this story. And I remember being like, oh God, he did it. Like he really, oh no. And she asked this question. And for years, the answer had always been, nope. Or in my past, not a big deal. And for the first time, I think the Holy Spirit really kind of came inside my heart. And I just told Joanna, yes, I am struggling. I am engaged in this. And then it got real quiet. Not a lot was said. She handed me the list and she said, here's your way forward. And I took it and dove in. And we dove in really together in terms of personal recovery, lots of intensives, counseling, group programs, really doing everything I could to get this out of my life for once and for all. And it was a tough journey. It was a really, really tough journey, much harder than I think I wanted it to be and thought it would be, but it has led to so much good. And even if we don't get to do what we do, we get to experience the kind of marriage we've always dreamed. That ceiling is kind of gone now. We know we have unlimited potential in our relationship because of what we got rid of. And that's really been the best news for us of all. The fact that we get to help other couples through it is kind of the icing on the cake for us. It's the oh, wow, we get to do this as well. That's
yeah. Yeah. And to God be the glory for that. And so, Joanna, you had mentioned these bumps, right? That made you start think like, this is curious. What's something's up here. And so thinking about wives who are in similar spaces where something is off, you also could, when you continue, like I'm assuming that, the bumps were like sexually, like I'm making these bid for sexual connection and everything was just fine. Now all of a sudden he had the attitude. But what was it that made you, what was that one thing or that group of things that made you say, I need to ask this question because something's up?
Yes, it had a lot to do with intimacy, both emotional and sexual, right? Kind of all of the different forms, very holistic. We would talk and share and share things that made me think, oh, our values are completely aligned. We want the same things. We have the same goals about like who we want to be as a couple, what we want our relationship to be. And then when I would push in to actually create that relationship, like Matthew was sharing, like there'd be this wall. And not only that, right? Like I couldn't get close because he would pull away or he would get angry or he like these very chaotic emotional responses. And so it didn't match up with what his actions weren't matching up with what he was saying. And so it was very confusing. And so I was trying to figure out like, what in the world could this be? And so that's why I asked the questions a few times. Now, I really didn't know what I would do if he said yes, if he was honest and answered the question. So I think in some ways I didn't push as hard as I maybe could have or would have had I known the resources, had I known there really is healing and freedom from this and there is hope for our relationship. That was just really scary. And so I think part of it was when I heard that pastor share and the experience lined up and there was finally kind of testimony of resources that bring healing, that bring freedom. I was like, okay, I'm ready to really hear the answer to this question.
That's good. That's good. And so as a woman, how did you navigate those feelings? Like once we got to the point of like, okay, he's watching porn, like, and can't seem to shake this. Like, did you have that, like, well, what's wrong with me? Or why am I not enough? Or like, did you have those, like, as far as like body image, like talk about that experience?
Yes, there is all sorts of feelings that come up, right? There is the relief of finally knowing like what the thing is. And maybe we can actually work through this now that it's out in the open. So it's like, there's that side. There was the anger of, okay, I've asked this and I've, and not only have I asked this and you've lied, but you've put on me things that were not my responsibility to carry. And so I think the anger in some ways helped me avoid some of the self-image. It was right. Because a lot of it was like Matthew shared, I would pursue intimacy, either emotional or sexual. And there'd be this kind of like wall or like, I'm tired or I just have low desire. Right. And when this came out, it was like, no, you don't just have low desire. You have desire. You've just chosen to practice that outside of our relationship. And that is not okay. And that's actually deprived me of the intimacy that I deserve. And so there was a lot of kind of justice anger that got welled up inside of me. And then there was some of that piece of like, but why? Why did he choose to go outside? Right. Yeah. And so I think it's really normal to ask those questions of like, okay, is it about me? Am I not enough? Thankfully, I was able to plug into some really fantastic resources. Barbara Steffens has a book, Your Sexually Addicted Spouse, that talks about sex addiction and betrayal trauma. And I really got educated really fast about what we were up against. And I think that helped a lot as well, realizing that nope, this is not about me in any way, shape, or form. This is completely about the brokenness, the pain of the other person who chose to do those things. And so being able to see that clearly helped a lot in the beginning.
I love that you said like you plugged into those resources really early. And I think sometimes people like we take time to just sit with the realization and having like I have to just embrace, okay, this is my life.
Yeah.
Before we go about the repair process or the resource, like engaging with resources, but then like stuff tends to continue to take root and seeds continue to, you know, bear fruit from that. So I like that. Matthew, when I work with couples, I've worked with couples in the past that pornography has played a great role in their relationship, like a negative impact in their relationship. One couple in particular thought it got to the point where the wife was struggling to reconcile what she imagined his relationship with the pornography was. So she kind of got into this place where she was almost in competition with the pornographic images, right? And I say all the time in social media, my podcast and stuff, I tell women you can't compete with porn, and you'll never be able to compete with porn, and not because you're not enough, but because porn is not real. And it's a fantasy, and trying to compete with a fantasy is like being on a hamster wheel. But what would you say from not even just a man's standpoint, but from the partner who had this who were in a place where you could not let go, you had this deep relationship with pornography, what would you say to the other partner as far as that like competition piece?
Yeah. I think, I think just acknowledging and validating that, like Joanna said, like that is a really natural place to go and a really understandable place to go, because that is the question we all ask. It was the question ultimately I was asking myself underneath, right? What am I? Am I lovable? Am I enough? And the problem is that my early childhood experiences and things that happened in my life had helped me to craft a narrative that no, I wasn't. And so I was just taking in experiences on a day-to-day basis and reinforcing that narrative. And that narrative sucks. It is horrible to hold on to. And so what I learned to do was I can get rid of the pain of that narrative by this medication. And that's really what porn was to me. It was a medication. But it was a medication that I was refusing to acknowledge the damage it was doing to myself and truly what it was doing to other people. And that's the problem with addiction or compulsive behavior and really just destructive behavior in general. We allow ourselves to continue it because we don't want to get honest about what's really happening, what the message it was really sending. I was sending Joanna the message, you're one of many. You don't matter. You're not unique. You're not special, right? And that was awful because that was the exact opposite message of my heart, right? We had a great relationship. I mean, maybe not great. We had a very good relationship. People would see us around and there go the Raabsmiths, and you guys are always so happy and everything is perfect in your life. And a lot of that was like true, but the way I was living, like Joanna was saying, it was not integrity. So I understand when partners come and go, I don't know, right, what this means. Does this mean that I'm not enough? And maybe I'm not enough for him. And I usually will tell them, you're more than enough for him. That's how God has made you. The sin and brokenness of our world is constantly trying to send us another message. And that's the message that the enemy wants you to take hold, right? That you're not enough.
Yeah.
Hopefully, with good community, partners who've been betrayed can reclaim that message of, no, I'm absolutely enough, right? I'm more than enough for this marriage. And that's, I think, just a big key.
I think that's where it's helpful to remember the addiction side, or at least the brain chemistry side of what's going on through pornography. And we even have clients who struggle with things like screen addiction, right? Where you are getting these bursts of dopamine from something that it is easy, it's fast, it takes little effort on your part, and your brain gets hooked on that. So normal, healthy human interaction no longer give you the rush that they should have or could have. And so a lot of it is kind of rewiring that arousal desire template. So you start to crave healthy intimacy and relationship instead of those quick fixes that don't last.
Yeah. So I want to go back also to the kind of like demystifying what's actually happening in that porn relationship, right? Because that's essentially what it is. And I keep using the word relationship because when we have these vices, whether it is pornography, eating, masturbation, any of these habitual sins, we are in a very unhealthy, toxic relationship with these things. These things that they keep drawing us back, even though we know they mean us no good. For whatever reason, we still, run back to it. Matthew, speak to the person, gentleman, woman who is watching this, who I get a lot of folks in my DMs are like, they don't know how to stop. Like they cannot particularly because it started so early on.
Yeah.
They literally don't know a world where pornography of some sort is not a part of their regular flow. And it even gets to the point where this is not even about sex anymore. It's not even a sexual, like you're not watching porn because you're horny anymore. So talk to that person.
Yeah, I think the two first steps that were so instrumental for me was one, getting honest in a way that carried some weight and some vulnerability to it. I'll tell guys a lot of times, like, they'll say like, I have accountability partner and, a guy in my group. And I'm like, that's not accountability because that person doesn't lose anything when you relapse, right? When you go back to your addiction. The people I'm accountable to is Joanna and my children. Those are the people who pay the price if I engage in behaviors that destroy me and by nature our relationship. And so part of what I had to do is I had to learn to get honest with Joanna. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be honest with anybody where I thought it could cost me. And I thought it would cost me everything. So I didn't tell anyone. And part of freedom came in going, I'm going to start to talk about it. I'm going to name it. Now that started in therapy rooms, in small group rooms of men who are also going through this, who could hear that and understand it and show compassion and grace. That was a little easier than Joanna. And so I tell guys all the time, like, don't go to your wife expecting unrelenting and unconditional compassion because she's going to be hurt. But you can get that other places, healthy places, and build your kind of tolerance for honesty and transparency until you begin to realize that, when I'm honest, when I'm transparent, I get a greater gift than I ever got with porn, which was that I actually get to feel accepted. The whole time Joanna and I were married and I was hiding from her, I couldn't answer the question confidently whether she accepted me or not. I knew she accepted the version of me I would show her, right? It was like, you can see this version of me and you'll accept that. And that's how I felt with the whole world, right? They will only accept this perfect version of me. That's a horrible way to live. When I got honest, Joanna and so many other people have showed me, we accept you. We may not love and we don't accept this behavior, but we accept who you are as a person. And that was an incredible gift. And so getting honest so you can experience acceptance. And then setting boundaries. You cannot change something if you want to keep living the same way. I was really thankful that I had some kind of hard-nosed, addict. And this was the good thing. I was in a 12-step group and they didn't play around. It wasn't like, keep your phone on late at night, right? And scroll through social media. They were like, no phone, no that, right? I was locked down for months, even beyond that, with very, very little engagement with digital media. I'm so glad I was. One, it helped me realize not a just general helpful thing in my life. And two, it helped me to realize like, I can't live in the world like some other people maybe can. I have to live a little differently and that's okay. And it was those boundaries that set me free. But they were also the boundaries that I think really communicated to Joanna that there was change happening, that I wasn't going to put this kind of on her, or I wasn't going to kind of put it on the back burner.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Speaking of those boundaries, right? What does, and you said that you're accountable to your children and Joanna with those boundaries. What does accountability look like? What are those, how, or I guess my question is for you, Joanna, what role do you play in those safeguards being in place?
Yeah, I don't play any role whatsoever. It is fully and completely his responsibility. I get to observe it all. He's open, he's transparent, he's communicative around what his boundaries are, and he evidences those boundaries with his life. And so early on, one of the boundaries was if I wasn't home, he was not on the computer. He was not on the internet at all. And so if he needed to do something, he was riding his bike, because we had one car at the time, down to the public library and pulling out his computer there where everyone in the library could see the screen. And he would text me and he would let me know, hey, I'm headed to the library so I can use my computer. There was constant communication around the boundaries. There was evidence that he was following his own boundaries. It was him initiating the boundaries that he needed to stay safe. And because part of what I knew, because of some early work we had done in our relationship, even before recovery, is that I can't control him. That's not feasible. And I won't be safe if I'm the one controlling his recovery. Because ultimately, I need someone who is a partner, who is fully responsible for himself, his sobriety, and his recovery, and who's fully and open and honest about those things as well. It was terrifying though, right? Like, he's just let this bomb go off in our relationship. Like, that's not very responsible. That's not very safe. And I'm supposed to just, like, hands off, be like, okay, what you gonna do about it? Like, there was a real fear that he was not going to do the things he needed to. And so I think there was fear. There was a lot of needing to trust God for my story. I didn't know what the future was going to be. And so I wrestled a lot with that early on.
And what's really cool that came out of that, because she let me do my work, I got to regain my sense of integrity and my sense of self, because these were my boundaries, my recovery, my work. It wasn't about pleasing her. It wasn't about trying to get her to trust me again. It really became about, what kind of life do I want to live? And I liked the kind of life I was living. And those questions that I had about myself, am I enough? Am I a good man? All of a sudden I was answering them, right, through what God was telling me, and it being reflected in my actions. I was getting to kind of live my authentic self the way God had made me. I think if Joanna had done that kind of controlling work, because we see this in a lot of couples, and it makes tons of sense, right? I'm scared, I'm in danger, so I'm going to control, I'm going to kind of get you to do something. It wouldn't have let me kind of build that sense of who I want to be. And I see this a lot, like, it tends to build resentment towards the person who's setting those boundaries for you, right? You're kind of like, yeah, I'll do them, but I'm not happy about it. I'm going to be building this anger towards you, or I'm going to have this kind of expectation. I'll do what you want, but you better give me what I want. And that's what we find in relationships is, relationships are about this really tight, life-giving intimacy and unity, but it's when two healthy people who care for themselves are able to care for the relationship, rather than this idea of, like, I'm going to parent you and you're going to parent me, and maybe we'll both mature that way.
And there's still give and take, right? So because he's named his boundaries, it's really easy for me to speak up when he's not following or honoring his own commitments, right? And so there may be times like, hey, you told me this was your boundary. This is the behavior I saw. That doesn't line up. And you are breaking down safety right now on an already fragile relationship. So you now get to choose what you do with that, right? And so I'm not going to control what you do with that, but you need to know, I see your lack of consistency. Or maybe there's an area he hasn't created a boundary around. I remember one particular event he was attending at work, and I was just like, what are you going to do about it? Because this doesn't feel safe or comfortable. And so I was able to name and communicate my experience and be involved in that process in that way by still putting it on him to like, you got to figure out what you do with this. You need to figure out if this is healthy and safe for your sobriety, if you're going to even go, or if you need to go with boundaries or what that looks like.
Right.
So there's still an involvement in the process. There's still a relationship and a back and forth, but just from a different space than having to dictate and control and create all of that structure.
Yeah. So it's more of you serving as like a mirror as opposed to a warden, which in good godly marriages, we should be mirrors for one another. For good godly character, that as a helpmeet, that's what you're supposed to do. Even if there was no betrayal, you would still, if he was being mean to somebody, you should say, now, what's that, God? What fruit of the spirit is this here? You know?
Absolutely.
Speaking of recovery, and you in your language, Joanna, you spoke about like your imaging for the future and things like that. And then those bumps that you mentioned as far as like the blocks to intimacy, as you are now on the other side and in recovery and things like that, speak to the couple who is walking this journey, that give them a hope for what sex and intimacy looks like now on the other side.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much better. Oh my, so much less anxiety, so much less wondering and question marks and back and forth, right? It's really, and it's been a process of growth. It wasn't like this happened overnight. It's something we still work on, but I think we would both say that we have actually been able to create through what we've been through and the work we put into healing. We've been able to create the relationship that we always talked about wanting, but thought we could never get. Right? It is there. It is possible. And I think a part of me early on thought that dream was completely gone. Like maybe we could get through it. We could be stable. We could be okay. Maybe even good, but man, those dreams we had, like that's not a possibility anymore. And so I think there was a lot of sadness and grief over that. I never realized or never thought that we could regain that, and so much more, because through this process your vision of intimacy starts to grow and explode, expand, right? And so it's really exciting going like, okay, and whatever it is that we have now, I fully expect this is not what we have in 5 years, in 10 years, 15 years, right? Like I fully expect our intimacy to continue growing the rest of our relationship.
Well, I want to mention for maybe the men out there as well. I'm having the best sexual experiences and the best relational experiences I've ever had in my life. Amen. So much of our sexual experiences, even if they were good at the time that I was in my addiction, I was constantly fighting this question of, am I in my addiction? Am I with her? Where am I? I don't have that anymore. I get to be fully present with her, and we get to have so much more to our sexual experiences than we ever had before. And I get to really be there for it. And I think everything I was searching for in the connection that I was building in that relationship to pornography you were talking about, I actually get now, but it's way better than I even imagined it would be. And I think that really speaks to the sanctifying work of God. The purification is this process of, because I don't do this anymore, it's not in my brain, it's not in my head. And because it's not in my head, I'm in my head. I get to be there present with the woman that I love. And that's really the gift I didn't think I would get from God. Like Joanna was saying, like, I didn't think that was going to be possible. I thought I would probably be having this kind of stunted connection and sexual experience the rest of my life because of all the damage I had done. What's been really amazing is how free I get to be in our relationship. Not that I deserve it, but that God has really given me that gift. Yeah. And that has been just such a joy.
Yeah. Ain't he so good? God is really good. He really truly is. And when he says that, when you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, that all other things will be added. I think that it is not by happenstance that the sin is so easy, the weight and the sin is so easily besets so many of us is sexual in nature, that most of the curse is sexual in nature, that Adam and Eve, when shame and sin entered, they went straight to the loins to cover. Like, that's not by happenstance, right? But when he says all things will work together, it truly is all things. And there is nothing concerning us that he isn't concerned about. So for you to say, Joanna and Matthew, that these are some of the best sexual experiences I've ever had, and to be able to say that after like pornography make its whole purpose is to make you feel like that is the best that ever was, and you're considered like drug addiction, you are consistently chasing that first high and you never ever get it because it's never ever real. And in sin, Satan is very good at crafting these beautiful mirages. And I think that porn is a mirage of intimacy. Porn is a mirage of pleasure. Porn is a mirage of the word, one of the good words you said, Matthew, of acceptance, and is acceptance without cost. In relationships, you have to, well, in Christianity, you have to die to self. In relationships, you have to consider others. In relationships, it's not just all about me. That's a give and take. But in porn, all I got to do is press the button, and then their job is to make me feel good.
Yeah.
Right. And when you die to self, you gain so much more. That is when the all things begin to come together, when you're seeking the Lord and his righteousness, which is our character, which sin tells us that, the lawless living is the fun, but righteousness, that's really where the goodness, that's really where the goodness is. And so I am so grateful for this conversation. I'm so glad that we had this opportunity. I honor the Lord in your life as well as your transparency, because you all could have gone through this, packed it up, and this could have been, private to your own house. You know what I mean? But you cry loud and spare not, and we appreciate that there is people, couples, individuals watching this who feel like that same thing, that they'll never be able to overcome this, that they are living under the weight of that fractured existence, especially believers who have to be out front, right? Especially leaders, right? Leaders don't have a safe place to be able to say, hey, I done preached the word, I done prayed fire down from heaven, but me and Chi with the Chi-Chis, I got 3 hours with her when I get home. You know what I mean? There's no place, no safe place for them to say that. And so I think that those who will watch this will be able to have that hope, like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. So I will be sure to include in the show notes all of your resources, how they can connect with you for the support that you provide. Because I find as a professional that people connect more when you can connect with their story, not just professionally, but personally as well. Like when you say, I get it, when you say, I understand, baby, I'm not telling you what I heard. I'm telling you what I know. Okay. So that was really good. I really appreciate that. What, if any, closing thoughts or encouragements you have for someone who is struggling with porn or masturbation or any of those other vices, and then someone, a partner who is walking alongside someone in that struggle?
I think I like to remind people it's a lot of little steps. We were able to tell our story in a short amount of time. It took years. The process was small, and it was a lot of little steps. It was opening up my heart to the possibility that God would give me a way forward. It was Joanna listening to the Spirit. And so I think just like, you don't have to think about the end game yet. Sometimes it's just that willingness to go. Maybe if I went and I talked to someone that I trusted and I let them know what I was going through, maybe that's the best first step I can make. And I can confess to someone I know that I trust, and that will be all I can do right now. I just want to let people know that's enough. That one step is enough to let God in and to do more and more work in you.
I think for partners, knowing that you're not alone, intimacy and sexuality is such a hidden topic in so many circles and communities. And so a lot of partners I know are walking through this to feel completely isolated and even wonder, am I the only one who's experiencing this in my marriage and feeling these things and going through this pain? And so knowing that, no, you are not alone, and you're not supposed to do this journey alone. There is a community wanting to welcome you and your pain and your grief with open arms, to walk alongside you as you heal.
Yes, absolutely. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, thank you so much, Joanna and Matthew. Thank you to you all for watching. This has been, I am certain that if you watch this, you have at least one, if not 40 takeaways for someone either in your life or you personally that is struggling with these vices. And if your vice is not pornography, if your vice is not, problematic sexuality, masturbation, anything, your vice could be Reese's Pieces. If it's anything that has control over you that you don't have the power to lay down, pay attention to this episode. Matter of fact, start it over and watch it again, because what at the heart of it, what they shared, there is honesty, and that uncomfortable bearing all, not the curated cute, here's what I want, here's what I'm okay with you knowing, but the bear it all. You have to be able to risk it all to heal from it all. And I think that what keeps a lot of us from being honest is that we fear what we're going to lose. So we try to control and kind of manipulate the honesty, which is not honesty in and of itself. And we do it a lot with the Lord. Like, how you doing that with somebody who's omniscient? You know, and omnipresent. He was there when you did it. Either way. But there's that honesty that needs to be there. A leading, you hear as Matthew said about Joanna, leading of the Holy Spirit, because she could have been like, you know what? I'm out of here. That's on you. I didn't sign up for this. I'm out of here. But even that, her surrender allowed Matthew to fully surrender and allow the Holy Spirit to have his perfect work in their relationship. And you see the fruit of that, not even in their own relationship, but how they're able to be a tool put back in the hands of the Lord to be used to bless others. And I'm going to repeat, the man of God said, this is the best sexual experience he's ever had in his entire life. So the lie that porn is as good as it gets, we see right now it's not the truth. So thank you so much. Make sure you all are engaging with Joanna and Matthew in there. Follow them on social media. Hook up with their website, their resources. You will not be disappointed. In fact, you will be blessed. Make sure you join us back here in 2 weeks. This has been Theory Discussions, where we keep it real, raw, and righteous, with my wonderful guests, Joanna and Matthew Raabsmith. And I am your girl, Brittany Broaddus-Smith, the #1 Christian sexologist and your favorite girlfriend. Bye.